Without further ado, I continue with part 2 of my critique of this virulent misogynist and his YouTube video.
Something they'll never be in hopes of women liking them. PUAs believe they've developed some kind of technique for getting loads of women, when all I see them doing is telling unsuspecting men to spend money on bars and club cover charges to act all alpha in the mini matriarchy that is the Saturday night bar and club scene throughout the West.
So I don't understand how men buying women drinks constitutes a quote-unquote mini matriarchy. Matriarchy and patriarchy should not be brandied about in a cavalier manner. They refer to societal dynamics that are deeply ingrained and often institutionally supported, and amount to the subjugation of one group by another. Patriarchy obviously being the subjugation of women by men, and matriarchy obviously being the subjugation of men by women. So this notion that men buying women drinks, it constitutes a matriarchal. I don't even understand how that's discriminatory towards men at all. If anything, it seems discriminatory towards women, given the fact that it implies that they're incapable of financially or otherwise of purchasing their own drink, or perhaps it's a gesture of concern, but I don't view it in any sense as insulting to men. Yes, they're spending their money, but even if it is minimally insulting to men to quote-unquote demand, as if women are demanding, it's more of a societally propagated thing. But even if women were quote-unquote demanding the men buy their drinks, even if this were a societal pressure unfairly exerted upon men, I don't see how this makes bars a mini matriarchy. It's a mild inconvenience for men, if anything. And perhaps one unjust practice. But it's not subjugation by any vast stretch of the term, by any vast alteration of what that term traditionally refers to.
Any given weekend. Then they tell them to spend money on fashion and to consider getting their eyebrows plucked, and always make sure you're up on the latest fashion.
So he's referring to these consultants called PUAs that advise men on how to best attract women, in essence. And he's saying that these PUAs unjustifiably emphasize fashion and kind of emasculate males by causing them to be concerned with fashion. Now, I agree. Men should not be concerned with fashion, just as women should not be concerned with fashion. But I don't know why you're focusing on the fact that certain consultants called PUAs, who attempt to advise men on how best to attract women, unjustifiably emphasize men's fashion and advocate more concern for fashion amongst males who want to attract women. Now, yes, that's unjustified, but I don't see why you emphasize that in favor of the fact that the entire fashion industry and much of certain facets of the medical industry, certain components of the medical industry, as well as the media and celebrity culture and etc., make however many billions of dollars annually on degrading and objectifying women. They make women feel insecure in their bodies to the extent that they want tummy tucks, breast enlargements, that they need to dress in a certain fashion. This dress makes me look too fat, etc. That they often engage in things like anorexia and bulimia because they view themselves as excessively overweight. There are entire industries dedicated to making women feel insecure so that they purchase their products. The fashion industry makes women feel insecure. The plastic surgery industry makes women feel insecure. They're never satisfied with how they look. They always feel that they're too overweight or that they don't have enough makeup on. That's the other industry, the cosmetic industry. I suppose that's a subset of the fashion industry, making women feel that they do not look beautiful enough if they don't put lipstick on, which is an entirely unnatural cultural creation. So they never look good enough. They're never sexy enough. These clothes are not revealing enough. This dress makes my stomach look too fat, etc., etc., etc. So the fact that you would focus on certain men in a certain profession that overemphasize fashion and over-advocate fashion attention for men, as opposed to the multi-million and billion-dollar industries that make women feel insecure just so they'll buy their products or buy their services, is really just telling. It's really indicative, again, of your disregard for a neutral, rational, intellectual approach, and instead you opt for expressing your hatred of women in a pseudo-intellectual fashion.
That's right, fashion. These PUAs actually recommend that men stay up on the latest fashion for men so that they can always look alpha.
Again, that's unjustified for men and it's unjustified for women. Fashion is a cultural contrivance. It causes insecurity, it causes stress, it does not contribute to one's fulfillment, and thus should be disregarded. But women fall victim to that far more than men do as a result of the aggressively patriarchal nature of society, and specifically of the fashion industry, facets of the medical industry, and celebrity culture at large.
Let me tell you more on something. Male fashion is an oxymoron. Women have fashion. Men have clothes because men understand that the reason for clothes is to, and I know this won't jive with your alpha bullshit PUA indoctrination you've been lobotomized with, but the reason for clothes is to clothe. I know that's a foreign...
Yes, the reason for clothes is to clothe, whether you're male or female. It's not just to... Yeah, he's entirely right there insofar as it's true that fashion is a cultural contrivance and that men should not pay attention to fashion. Clothes are, yes, as he states, to clothe. This is entirely true, but it's also entirely true for women. Women do not care about fashion in any more of a natural sense than men do. Women care about fashion as a result of cultural indoctrination, as a result of indoctrination from a patriarchal, celebrity-obsessed, fashion-obsessed society. This is evidenced by the fact that women throughout history, in pre-cultural times, pre-civilizational times, did not care about fashion, just as men in pre-civilizational, pre-cultural times did not care about fashion or, looks at all. This is true both of men and of women.
Concept to you pussy-chasing lapdogs, but it's time we stop telling men to spend money on anything designed to impress females, including bars, drinks, club cover charges, and overpriced articles of clothing that...
I agree. Men should not spend money on these absurd cultural contrivances just to impress women. And women should not spend money on absurd things like sexy clothing and tummy tucks and boob jobs just to impress men. But they've been rendered insecure by this sick society, and that's what they do. And to some extent, men have been rendered insecure by this sick society and by certain individuals. And as a consequence, certain men also care excessively about spending money to impress women. It goes both ways. Your focus on men as alleged victims of this is rather telling. And also, you could argue, the reason I say that women fall victim to it is because there's just so much brainwashing and etc. And it's not by any means a statement of women's unique inability to recognize cultural conditioning and transcend it. It's indicative of the fact that women are much more exposed to it than men. There aren't these multi-billion-dollar industries that dedicate all their attention to making men feel insecure. And there are for women. So I can perfectly understand why women are fall victim to this and fall for this. It has nothing to do with the lack of intelligence of women. It has to do with the effectiveness of the propaganda and the dehumanization. Now, to the contrary, yes, there are certain romance consultants, these PUAs, that do advise men to be concerned with their fashion, but it's not nearly as prevalent. And this leads me to the belief that you're somewhat admitting or alleging implicitly that men are not very intelligent and not very capable of engaging in critical thinking, because you're alleging that because there are these PUAs which men willingly hire to help them attract women, that that men are helpless in the face of these comparatively powerless to the comparable women institutions that advocate men paying attention to fashion. So there's two facets to this my critique here. It's that if anyone is the victim to these cruel propaganda campaigns, it is women. And then the second aspect of my critique is because it's much less prevalent and men are much less targeted by this absurd focus on fashion and those that advocate it, they should be much more capable of not falling victim to it. And I suppose that's what you're saying to some extent. Men shouldn't fall victim to this. You are talking to men. You are criticizing men for falling victim to fashion. So I suppose that facet of my critique is perhaps unwarranted. The bottom line is your statements apply both to men and women, and much more so to women. Don't focus on men.
Nothing but service plumage for STD-ridden bar sluts. Economic independence.
Again, you're demonstrating your objectification and your extreme irrationality when you describe women as bar sluts, as opposed to complex beings with their own aspirations, desires, fears, and diverse personalities.
From women and their courtship requisites. That's what men need. Drive down the price of pussy. Ridicule female supplicators like manginas and white knights. Expose those that seek only to thrive in the iniquities of the clubs and bars that uphold female hypergamy and the cost of pussy price gouging that it supplies to females. I mean, does it bother anyone else that we have an entire industry designed to tell men how to walk, talk, dress, and act so that women will want them? Does it not?
Yes, we have an industry that certain men hire these individuals that will advise them on how to dress, talk, act, walk, etc., so that they're more inclined to be viewed as sexually attractive to women. But these industries absolutely pale in comparison to in terms of the extent to which they permeate every facet of our society, in terms of the extent to which they permeate society, in terms of the extent to which they make their target demographic feel insecure. They absolutely pale into insignificance in comparison to the comparable institutions that target females, such as the plastic surgery industry, as aforementioned, the fashion industry, as aforementioned, cosmetic industry, which is a subset of the fashion industry, as aforementioned. The fact that you would allege the fact that men are more inclined to fall victim to this than women, that the industries that subjugate men in this regard are more pervasive than those that subjugate women in this regard. The fact that you would allege this is absolutely indicative of both A, your irrationality, and B, your hatred of women. I'm running out of time here. There's like 1.5 minutes left on this video by this virulent misogynist, Barbarossa, YouTube user, but I'm just going to end it here because I think I've said all that needs to be said. This individual clearly does not even really attempt in any meaningful sense to substantiate his claims, either with empirical evidence, with some explanation of how he obtained an intuitive understanding, or even with anecdotes from other individuals, or any kind of specifics whatsoever in terms of just any kind of reasonable degree of specifics. So clearly, he despises women as a group. He subjugates them. He's a hypocrite. He's irrational. He's incapable of even the most basic elaboration and proof for some wild generalizations that he makes. Thanks for listening.